The world is a constantly changing place. Always new alliances are being created and old ones being destroyed. There is a constant flux in the way that different countries and different powers around the world view the international realm and impose their foreign policies and their agendas upon the rest of the community of nations. As we know now, once again, the Iran nuclear deal, which has been the center of controversy for quite some time now for multiple reasons that have implications for the world order, for nuclear proliferation, and the dynamics of the Middle East, which are also relevant to Pakistan's existence and Pakistan's foreign policy, is once again under focus. Dear students, welcome to the 43rd session of the KIPS Distance Learning Program Current Affairs Newspaper Roundup session. I am your host Shahrukh Haider, and today we are going to see how the Iran nuclear deal and the discord between the European and the American foreign policy directions in this respect is basically an indication of a broader spectrum of change in international relations. So, only 2 days ago, the signatories of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, also known as the Iran nuclear deal, which was signed in 2015 between Iran and international powers including the United States, Britain, France, Germany, Russia and China. The deal is also called as P5+1, the one being Germany in this case. So these parties 2 days ago met in Vienna to review the developments and the politics of the Iran nuclear deal. The absence of the United States was particularly visible in this case because it was apparent that the United States did not want to participate in any kind of forum that was meant to preserve the Iran nuclear deal. So these countries, after this agreement, after this summit, gave a joint statement that they stand united in their opposition to US efforts to undo the Iran nuclear deal, and they are completely for the Iran nuclear deal and for further strengthening it and will not in any scenario abandon it, right? So this is an indication of a growing rift between the United States and its most important and historical allies in Europe. So ever since Trump's election to the US presidency, this shift and this change in the priorities and foreign policy directives of the United States and Europe is becoming more and more clear. So this divide is a trend of the larger dynamics of international relations. An important article was actually published in the New York Times magazine by the name of The End of Anglo-American Order in 2016. I have attached that article in the video description below. Be sure to open it and read it. That is very relevant to today as well. In that article, the writer basically points out that the election of Donald Trump to the presidency of the United States and the British exit from the European Union is basically the beginning of the end of the Anglo-American order. The Anglo-American order is basically the global politics dominated by US and its closest ally Britain, supported by the European Union. So presently, Trump and Trump presidency, the United States under the Trump presidency has been consistently moving in an isolationist state, away from collective efforts, away from diplomacy, away from compromise and constructive dialogues on different global issues and how to solve them, right? So in this respect, the Trump administration is undoing decades of diplomacy and multilateral initiatives in international relations, which began when Trump came into power and withdrew the United States from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was going to be the largest free trade agreement in world history and would have represented nearly 1/3 of the global economy, but US withdrew from it. Secondly, the US also withdrew from North American Free Trade Agreement, also known as NAFTA, and insisted upon the terms and conditions of NAFTA being unfavorable to US businesses and US economy, and renegotiated it and created a NAFTA 2.0, which was really not really different from NAFTA and was basically an embarrassment for the US president. Then the president withdrew US from the Paris Climate Accord, which garnered international and global criticism of United States, whereas the original former president of the United States was the pioneer in creating international consensus on building the Paris Climate Accord. So now the US was certainly and immediately stepping away from the leadership role on international climate change action, which naturally is called for concern for everyone, specifically for climate activists and people who are concerned about the climate change. And then the US also, the point of our discussion today is that the US withdrew from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, also known as the Iran nuclear deal, including other UN agencies such as World Health Organization over its handling of the global pandemic recently, and withdrawal of all support and funding to the UN Agency for Palestinian Aid, which also drew international criticism, right? So this trend is visible nearly in all international stages where there is a clear rift between the foreign policy objectives of European Union and the United States. And this rift becomes clear when we look at what's happening in US support to the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land and annexation of their land. The EU stands in a very principled position that it wants to separate Palestinian lands and resolution from a collective diplomatic and joint efforts. Moreover, Europe's opposition to US sanctions on Iran is very apparent, and they have tried to circumvent those sanctions and create alternative sources of revenue and finance so that they can still do business with Iran and buy their oil. Thirdly, the US-China trade war is an important indicator of how and why there is a complete rift between Europe and US when it comes to foreign policy initiatives. So Europe is pretty much disillusioned with the United States leadership role in international relations, in international economic matters, and in international trade, which is why majority of European companies did not follow suit of United States and did not ban the wagon of trade tariffs and duties on Chinese goods as a response to the international US-China trade war. Moreover, many European countries did not also expel Chinese technology giant Huawei out of their countries and allowed Huawei to implement 5G technology in their countries despite massive US pressure and warnings from US of the potential repercussions of having China-owned Huawei implement security infrastructure and 5G infrastructure in European countries. Moreover, the EU and the United Nations Security Council also recently completely rejected US efforts and US resolution in the United Nations Security Council to extend indefinitely the arms embargo on Iran. So this points out to an emerging and important reality in international relations, upon which, by the way, an important topic also came in the recent Punjab Provincial Management Service essay examination, which was about the rise of populism and change in world global order. I would suggest that you read about it, you listen to this topic, you read about all relevant perspectives from different sources, research papers, YouTube channels such as there are a couple of YouTube channels that are relevant to this, BBC, CNN, and Al Jazeera, and Caspian Report, and a couple of other important ones. So consult all of these, and I would suggest that you should write an essay on this topic and then get it evaluated. So this marks the emergence of a new global world order, an order where the minus US formula seems pretty evident. However, China simply cannot replace the US in the role of global leadership, because China is not representative of the world's people. China is a very different kind of civilization and has a starkly different political system, which is why the people of the West, the democratic liberal people, will never accept Chinese leadership in international relations, which is why China is an inappropriate leader for global leadership. Now, with that being said, I think that there will remain to be a dearth of potential candidates for the global leadership, which is why this era marks the beginning of a multipolar world order, whereas there are multiple poles of power and influence around the world, and this would definitely lead to a lot of political instability and emergence and then destruction of new alliances and all of that. And this also is accompanied by a rise of the global south. So the global south, developing countries are consistently rising, including Southeast Asian countries, Gulf countries, Turkey, Malaysia, India, Brazil. All of these countries are emerging as important economic and political centers of power in international politics, and their influence will definitely reshape the global world order into a multipolar world order. Keep tuned in for more important updates. Thank you very much for your patience.